Hey everyone, welcome back to the rollout for our special Picard after show. I'm Lindsay Rousseau.
And I'm Genevieve Marie. Hello and welcome.
Episode 2, we just dove right into the action.
It happened.
Yeah, so obviously the end of episode 1, we got Q. For those of you who are not familiar with who this character is, if you are new to the Star Trek universe, he appeared in Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, Voyager, Lower Decks. I mean, he's been around the series for a while. Basically he's kind of been an antagonist to Picard, but he's this extra dimensional being who has power over time and space and reality and the laws of physics, and he's always wanting to like test people. So there's your quick recap as to who Q is, which kind of helps explain what's going to go down in this episode here.
Yeah, so I had no idea who that person was.
Yeah, I mean, we're going. Yeah, so Star Trek fans, Trekkie fans, you're gonna love the fact that this guy made an appearance, of course, and
maybe you won't,
or maybe you won't, because now it's going to take us down a story path that kind of feels done before. Again, the acting was great, loved the performances. My first thought when I saw this episode was, oh, it's the man in the high castle in space. That's literally what I thought.
Yeah. When you texted me that, I was like, that's it.
That's it.
That's the thing.
Yeah.
Oh God.
Yeah.
Because I was like, God, this is like, well, it's also very much tracking back to the original series where they go back to, Nazi Germany, and like, and also the fact that they have been redoing Mir for, I swear to God, every single Star Trek show and spin-off that has ever been made. And this is basically like Mir 2.6. Like I don't even know. And I was like, this is really just kind of, it's retreading old ground. It is kind of bothersome to me that we're going back to this weird, this storyline of oops, all Nazis. And because we are so far removed from World War II. Back when they did the Nazi episode with OG Star Trek, they weren't that far away from it. They weren't that far removed from it. It had been, it had been like a decade and a half.
It's close enough. Yeah.
It was close. However, nowadays, it's like we're so far removed from that. Like, those are not the problems that we're facing.
As we literally are sitting here facing war with Ukraine, with Ukraine facing war with Russia right now. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But the dynamics of that situation and of World War II and oops, all Nazis is completely different. They're two completely different animals. The geopolitical situations and climates are completely different. It's not the same. Whereas this, we are like, what is the lesson? Don't be a fascist.
Which seems to be exactly what the lesson.
There's a few people who need that lesson.
Yeah, there are quite a few people, but like even in the costume design, like they're dressed like stormtroopers meet imperial troopers from Star Wars. I'm like, literally, they're dressing them in those costumes that, for those of us who watch media, are like, oh, that invokes images of the Third Reich with everything.
However, that very obvious, and the fact that they call it, what was it, Extermination Day?
Extermination Day. Yeah.
The fact that they're so like blatant with it, with the
Eradication Day.
Eradication
yes.
Day. Got you.
Yeah.
The fact that they're so blatant with it, with the labeling and the uniforms and the we are all going to act
hold on. What's the quote? The quote was, "A safe galaxy is a human galaxy," is literally the quote we hear this version of Admiral Picard saying literally over the loudspeakers at the academy.
Very subtle, very smart.
And they have slaves. Again, and I loved watching the actor portraying Q. I thought it was great. But again, this whole time I was like, what is he talking about? He doesn't tell you what he wants. He's mad at you for not changing the way you want him. So now, and then his line about moral convictions are the luxury of the victors. So I was just very confused as to what exactly, and hopefully, again, we're going to have a whole season to figure this out. But there were so many quotes I wrote down from that opening episode about, you obviously don't like how Picard came out, but now you've created a reality where one thing changed and all of a sudden we are in Nazi Germany and there's slaves and Picard is a tyrant. And I was just like, right. Whoa, this just, it almost reminded me of our review on the Doctor Strange What If episode that was like, you changed this one thing, but it didn't create a character that I think would plausibly have been created.
No, because they said that like an event happened.
Right. 2024 in Los Angeles.
2024 in Los Angeles.
Which, for you Trekkies, that is potentially a reference to season 3 of Deep Space Nine, which went back in time to 2024 Los Angeles.
So something happened in 2024 Los Angeles, and it turned all of these people into like obvious fascist dictators and generals, and but that also starts there's a lot to say about it. Like
there's a lot to say because now this is centuries later. This is centuries later after this supposed event changes.
I don't know, man. I think that this is just not. When I was watching it, I was like, oh, they're trying to give us like some big like moral lesson, moral conundrum, you know, something that is really gonna hit home and just like make us think and, you know, kick us in the feels. And to me, this is, like we were saying, it's already been done before. We already have seen so many movies do this before, like you said, off air, V for Vendetta.
Yeah, Judge Dredd, Handmaid's Tale, Back to the Future.
Judge Dredd, Back to the Future. We've seen it done before. However, Star Trek needs to be better. Yeah. That's the thing, is you can do these movies and have fun with them. They all made their statements in the time that they were made. But Star Trek is about going above and beyond, about asking the big questions. It's about tackling the issues, obviously in Trek time, but the issues of our time in a TV show.
Right.
This is doing none of that. And it really is just kind of pissing me off because of the fact that if they were to actually point the fingers at the people that need to be held accountable for, we wouldn't have a show.
Yeah.
They would have to be pointing inward, and they'll never do that. So we get fascism and space Nazis.
Right.
And
we're not talking about, you know, yes, exactly. Yeah. We're not talking about what has led, you know, they're saying one event led to this fascist regime. And it's like, well, if anyone's been living through the past 6-7 years, you know, it's a slow burn, you know, and it just, yeah.
Right.
But again,
the things that we have, you know, the big things that we are facing today, like if we want to really get into it, you know, the big things and the big questions that we are facing today that need to be grappled with in a show like Star Trek that does push the boundaries, that is historically known for taking big strides in not just cinema, but in history.
Yeah.
Why aren't we discussing anything like climate change? Why aren't we discussing anything like economic or racial disparity? Why are we not discussing the dangers of capitalism when it is just let loose out into the world and allowed to do whatever? Why aren't we discussing the fact that the world is basically run, you know, by a very small group of people, who hold all the wealth and all the
Right.
power.
To that point, I do
Entirely
think they
between
tried to touch on the environmental thing when they showed the dome at the beginning. Again, they didn't explain it. They're just like, Q was literally like, in your universe, you guys figured out how to save the planet you were killing. In this universe, we just are prolonging it. So I was like, okay, you're kind of alluding to climate change. But in
Right.
place of dealing with the actual real world issues of racism and sexism that we are seeing in the world today, it's now humanism versus alienism. So I guess if we're all quote unquote racist against aliens, I think that's their attempt at trying to tackle the issues of discrimination in Star Trek, but it doesn't quite hit home.
It's so broad.
It's very broad. Yeah.
That's the issue, is that these things are so very, very broad that you can't really put it under a microscope and examine it. It just is a very what they're looking at is just a systemic eradication of anything that isn't human. I mean, that obviously is very in line with, fascist ideals, destroy. I'm actually very surprised that they didn't launch into the first they came for the Borgs, right, and then they came
exactly, the Romulans, and
the last they came for me. They really
did have the line, what was it? They had a line that was, witness what awaits insurrection, rebellion, and resistance. So it's this whole okay, we're talking about what happens when a fascist regime takes over. Again, we can parallel it to the modern era, and again, we are going to examine what this pivotal turning point was in 2024. But I just am very skeptical of that, because it's yes, one thing can change, but for the most part, it's a system, or it's not a system, it's a progression. One person with certain ideals vocalizes them, and then others follow, and others follow, and others follow. And I'm like, if they are trying to parallel the modern world, like you said, that requires a lot of self-reflection and looking at the money that has propelled these autocrats into power, that is the capitalistic system that has emboldened a lot of this behavior, the economic disparities between the rich and the poor, which is something we talked about in our episode about Squid Game. So if you're interested to know all of that, check out our episode on Squid Game.
Also, I just find it a little, these scenarios are just kind of a little hard to suspend my disbelief over, because of the fact that we live on an incredibly diverse planet, and they're all of, and we're broken up into countries, and those countries are governed by very different styles of government, and then there are also world religions. There's also a whole mess of things going on. I just don't really understand how the entire planet decided to become this one unified
human race
regime. Yeah,
exactly.
Human race. How did the humans get over their own bullshit?
Right, which I'm I call bullshit on that. That's not going to happen. Yeah,
I'm just I mean, you could argue that in the opposite direction of how did the whole world get over their human bullshit in order to pull together and save the planet.
But everyone on the planet, right? So all the humans on the planet over the past 2 centuries just all became fascists? Really?
Right. So here's the difference between those two worlds. The world that Star Trek takes place in, they have a whole world council. It is basically like a glorified UN, where everybody kind of, you still have governments, and you still have, people operating, their countries differently. Whereas this one, it assumes that the entire world is under this regime, and apparently, for some reason, they are just also going to call the top leader a president. At that point, I don't think that you would even be yes, Madam President. That makes no sense. They would literally be They would just literally be like, the supreme overlord at
Yeah.
that point,
Well, and honestly,
because that's the kind of world that they gave
right.
us.
And as I was
mustache twirly,
right. And as I was
thing.
watching this, like I was, because I just, finished up watching The Expanse, and I was like, I was making the parallels because, The Expanse is similar in that they're not dealing with multiple alien species, as far as, but they're dealing with humans who live in different areas, and there's a lot of discrimination between the Earthers and the Martians and the Belters. But the thing I really think that The Expanse did well is that there's no solidarity within any of those groups. I mean, literally all of season 5 and season 6 is about the schism between the Belters, and the one group of Belters that see themselves as the resistance and wanting to free the other ones, and the other Belters who are like, no, we don't want to do this. And then you had the factions within Earth so it's like, while they have gotten to a place where they're living in the stars, and there is like the Earth UN and the Martian, council and everything, it's like, no, there's still a shit ton of problems going on within your own people, let alone within everybody else.
There is, as long as people are people, there is always going to be different factions, different beliefs, people that agree, people that disagree. There are always going to be opposing morals and moralities. That and in societies that just don't mesh well with one another, that is just that is just what it is to be human. That is the human condition. This world presupposes that all of humanity is blanket the same, and that they will all get on board with this fascist regime. The majority of them, like, I'm assuming that they're going to like somehow be just briefly mention that, there were people that didn't agree with us, and what we did to them.
Yeah,
we got rid of them.
Because like I could understand if like the US became a fascist country, but there was still democracy in, I don't know, Switzerland, and I find it, like you said, I find it very hard to believe
the majority of the planet is under this regime, and then they're like starting to move in on the other countries or whatever, or there's like sort of like an Iron Curtain thing happening between the US and whoever is, and whoever the rebels are. Right.
And the fact that yeah, exactly. And that we would have reinstated slavery. Really?
Also that.
Really? Considering all the things that have happened in human history, you're going to tell me that the entire world was going to allow slavery to happen again? Yeah, again, like I said, I can see it being in enclaves of different countries in the world, but the world at large?
Right. Everybody just like shook hands on that, and they're like, yeah, duh, of course.
But they're aliens. But you know what, I guess before we wrap up, we've talked a lot about the story. Let's dig into some of the characters, at least just a little bit. We now have been introduced to our Stargazer 2.0 team, who is now found themselves in the new present. It's going to travel back in time. They rescue the Borg Queen. We're going to see how that goes. I'm sure shenanigans will ensue, but we now have our team, our and we have our archetypes within this team, which I was kind of hoping they would have maybe thought outside the box a little bit.
Procedural.
Yeah, we have the nerdy scientist who, I have to admit, I think Agnes is adorable. I honestly think that they actually did a good job writing her lines, but like I was a little annoyed when the Borg Queen turns to her and is like, oh, you have a feeling of unbelonging anywhere. And I was like, she's super smart and has friends. Like, are you saying nerds can't belong? Like, what are you talking about? We've got, the cocky pilot. And again, I'm a big fan of the actor who plays Rios. Like, I loved him in Musketeers. He's doing a great job with the character, but I'm like, we have our cocky, like, Han Solo-y type pilot. And then we've got like the badass lesbians, and we've got Picard. And I'm just like, oh, okay. Cool.
Yeah. And then dad Picard. Father Picard. Okay, so archetypes exist for a reason. They do. They're very good to have, especially when you're balancing out a team of people. They go very hard though. For this show, they go very hard with these archetypes. I really do think that it kind of feels like, I mean, they're obviously not writing evergreen content,
Yeah.
but it feels like the team that they have set up was taken from a show or taken somewhere like from or written by people who make a lot of evergreen content, which is basically like I mean, The Office used to be evergreen, but what's a good example? Like The Simpsons,
Right.
or
You could literally pick it up
Family
any
Guy.
yeah.
Right. You could literally just, there is no like continual through line, no continual storyline that like takes you through arcs and character narratives. You could just like write any sort of story for them for the next week and the next week and the next week. But yeah, it definitely does feel like these characters are written by people who are very used to evergreen content writing, which is a little distracting because you have to wonder how are these characters, besides Picard, who clearly is the one that they have singled out as the character that needs to grow.
Yeah.
Who besides Picard and how are they going to grow as characters when they've already very much established them as these hard line archetypes?
Right. I mean, I think they're attempting to do that with like Rafi and Seven's relationship, which started in season 1. And so far they've just alluded to it in season 2 when they joke that she's married and she's like, well, I guess you got over your commitment issues. And I'm like, haha, that's a relationship joke that we have no context for. Awesome. So I'm assuming that's going to be an arc.
But like, that's also a relationship. I'm talking more about
characters
being able to evolve and learn something and grow and become better people. Like, are these people going to essentially, this is my thing, are these people essentially going to start off and end up this basically the same, like from where they started, or are they going to go on a journey and become different people?
Right.
Which
seems to be what Q wants to happen, but
right. Essentially what you want is your character to start off in a place of, start off in a place and then end up having learned something and becoming better.
Yeah.
Or, I mean, depending on what kind of character you're writing. If it's a tragedy, obviously not gonna happen. Right. Not gonna become better. They'll learn something, but
exactly.
But yeah, so I'm kind of like torn between this wanting to be kind of a like a prime time, like HBO sort of like, big sweeping epic, and it really, really wanting to stay safely in that TV, sort of cable TV procedural.
Right. I think I read one review of season 1 that called it CSI Space Force, because they were like, you can tell, because it was originally, this is CBS. This was CBS All Access originally before it became Paramount Plus. Yeah. And it's like, oh, yeah, I kind of get what you're saying with that. Yeah.
Yeah. I agree with that. I strongly agree with that. I have to say, when they did not make it out of fascist world, I was extremely disappointed, because that means we have to spend more time in fascist world, and that fascist world is apparently the thing that they want to get across to the audience as the big lesson, or they want us to spend more time in it, and I could not wait to get out of there fast enough.
Because as someone who has watched every episode of The Handmaid's Tale, I do not need more shows that take place in fascist world. I just don't, because man, oh man, The Handmaid's Tale like met my quota and just surpassed it. I'm done with fascist world.
Yeah. Okay. And that's the thing, like, I know we yacked about it way too much in the beginning, but it really is a
Yeah.
big part of what the show is going to be.
Yeah.
Clearly, because we're still in it, we still have to get through episode 3, which is going to still be in fascist world. Um, I hope the entire season doesn't deal with this, like them having to be there. I hope they
Right.
get to, you know,
Go back to 2024 LA.
Go back to 2024 LA, like, but it's just bothersome. It really is bothersome to me that they are taking the Star Trek legacy and doing so little with it.
Right. I mean, this could be any other show. There's nothing Star Trek. Yeah, there's nothing special about this that makes this Star Trek. You could literally put a different title on it and it could be a different show.
Right. I'm not asking you to give me, you know, the first interracial kiss or to like invent the idea of the flip phone. I'm not asking you to freaking do that, but I am asking them to do something better than crap we've seen before and talk about non-issues.
Yeah.
Because these are hypotheticals. These are things that no matter like no matter where this particular country is heading, it's not going to turn into this crazy version of fascist world. That's just not something that is, it's not going to happen. And therefore, I'm not interested in seeing it happen on Star Trek.
I agree.
I would very much rather them either toe the line or come up very close to the line of something that is happening today and now that is a very pressing issue. And then I don't care if you fail, but try.
Try. Exactly.
Try, because that, if you don't try, you know, you're not gonna get anywhere.
Right.
You know what I mean? I don't know. I'm just very disappointed. I've been disappointed in what they've been doing with the legacy of Star Trek for the past decade or so. And, you know, they have something that is, you know, really precious to a lot of people.
Yeah.
And they're just turning out things that I'm not interested in.
Yeah.
I can't get into it because it's not something that we need right now.
Right. Yeah. On that note, we're going to wrap up this wrap up. I'm just going to end it with one little thing. I'm going to say shout out to the stunt team on this episode. And my brother had an epic death. That's all I'm gonna say. I've really much enjoyed. So the guy who got his throat shot or throat slit and kicked through the wall, that's my little brother. Very proud of him. So I will give a shout out to the stunt team for, you're doing a great job on this show, guys. Yes. Also, none of them are credited BT dubs. The stunt coordinator is in the credits. They do not credit the stunt team. So I'm just gonna say that should change. Anywho,
that should change.
It should change.
We've got a beautiful show that is very boring and so far, and is saying a lot and yet nothing at the same time.
So
I would be very interested to know what other people think, especially people who are very into the history of what Star Trek has given us historically.
Yeah.
You know, we especially like when it comes to, you know, new technologies, but also the things that you know, that Uhura's character has brought to the table as well. I mean, like if you ever get a chance to look into what Star Trek has done to the exploration, to space exploration and the history behind that, like do it. But I'd be very interested to hear like what you guys have to say about the legacy of Star Trek, where it's been, where it's going, and how these shows are fitting into it. Like, are they doing anything? Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they are doing something that is, you know, worthwhile. So please, you know, leave a comment. I'd like to know. You know, if you like this video, like, subscribe. I know Lindsay and I are pretty passionate and crazy, but
we can't be alone. I know we're not alone. So please, yes, let us know your thoughts. And I guess we'll be back next week with episode 3 and even more thoughts.
Even more thoughts. Yes. So yeah, hope you like the show. Hope to see you guys again. I'm gonna go make a lasagna, and I hope you have a good night. All right, bye guys.